There is a secret the oldest elders in Benin still refuse to tell after sunset. They say that beside the sacred stream of Omiosun, hidden deep inside the forbidden forest, there is a place where the living unknowingly step into the world of spirits. No hunter dares sleep there. No woman fetches water there after dusk. No child is allowed to speak loudly near its banks, because every 100 years, the forest chooses a bride, not for a king, not for a prince, but for a spirit no human has ever seen and lived to describe. Most people dismissed it as another frightening tale invented by old women around the evening fire, until the day the only daughter of the Oba disappeared, only to return months later wearing royal beads no human hands had ever made, and she claimed she had married the king of the sacred forest. Some believed her, others called her mad, but what happened after her return changed the Kingdom of Benin forever. Tonight, you will hear the forbidden legend of the princess who married a spirit from the sacred forest. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments. If a spirit offered you unimaginable wealth in exchange for your heart, would you accept? Now, let us journey back to the ancient Kingdom of Benin, the kingdom blessed by the forests, long before white men crossed the great waters, before roads divided the forests, before clocks ruled men's lives. There stood a magnificent kingdom whose walls stretched farther than the eyes could see. It was the glorious Kingdom of Benin. Its bronze craftsmen were admired across distant lands. Its warriors feared no enemy. Its markets overflowed with ivory, coral beads, spices, woven cloths, and precious bronze works. The Oba ruled with wisdom. The elders governed with honor. The ancestors were respected. The spirits were never mocked. Among the many villages under the kingdom stood one called Uselu. The village rested beside a dense ancient forest known as Igbo Ovia. No ordinary forest, it was older than memory itself. The oldest Iroko trees touched the heavens. Their roots disappeared beneath the earth like giant serpents. Even sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor. Deep inside the forest flowed a crystal clear stream called Omi Osun. Its water sparkled like polished glass. During drought, it never dried. During floods, it never overflowed. Its water healed wounds. Its fish never died. Its banks never changed. Yet everyone feared it, because no one owned it. The elders always reminded the villagers, the forest belongs to the spirits. We only borrow its blessings. The Oba had only one child, Princess Ewer. She was 18 years old, graceful, kind, brilliant, and breathtakingly beautiful. Her laughter could brighten the darkest day. She treated servants with kindness. She greeted the elderly with respect. She visited widows, carrying food herself. The people loved her deeply. But Ewer possessed one dangerous quality: curiosity. She questioned everything. Whenever palace chiefs warned her about spirits, she smiled. Whenever priests forbade certain places, she wanted to see them herself. Whenever old women whispered frightening stories, she wanted to know whether they were true. Her father often warned her, "My daughter, a wise ruler respects both what she understands and what she does not." Ewer would bow respectfully, yet deep inside, questions never stopped growing. One evening, as the sun melted behind the forest, Ewer secretly left the palace with only her closest maid, Adesua. They wanted to gather rare forest flowers, flowers said to bloom only beneath the oldest trees. As they wandered deeper, the forest became strangely quiet. Birds stopped singing. The wind disappeared. Even insects fell silent. Adesua trembled. "Princess, we have gone too far." Ewer smiled. "Nothing lives here except trees." Then they heard music, not drums, not flutes, but a melody unlike anything either had ever heard. Soft, beautiful, almost magical. The music floated through the trees, drawing them toward the sacred stream. Adesua refused to continue. I cannot go. Yue walked alone. There, standing beside Omi Osun, was the most handsome young man she had ever seen. His skin shimmered like bronze beneath the evening light. He wore white garments untouched by dust. Around his neck rested coral beads, unlike any crafted in Benin. His smile carried both peace and sadness. He looked at her as though he had been waiting. My princess, he said gently, you finally came. Yue frowned. We have never met. The stranger smiled. We met long before either of us was born. The princess laughed softly. What kind of answer is that? Instead of replying, he picked up a dry leaf, placed it upon the stream. Immediately, the leaf bloomed into a living white flower. Yue gasped. The stranger simply smiled. My name is Obanosa. He never mentioned where he came from, nor where he lived. Yet before sunset, he vanished into the forest without making a sound. Yue searched. There were no footprints, only silence. From that day onward, she returned to the stream again and again. Each evening, Obanosa appeared. They talked for hours. He spoke about stars, about forgotten kingdoms, about rivers older than time, about ancestors whose names had vanished from memory. Every answer created 10 more questions. And slowly, the princess fell in love. Days turned into weeks. Weeks quietly became months. Every evening, just before the sun disappeared behind the giant Iroko trees, Princess Iwer found an excuse to leave the palace. Sometimes she claimed she wanted to pray at the ancestral shrine. Sometimes she said she wished to visit widows in the village. Other times she simply slipped away unnoticed. Only one person knew the truth. Her loyal maid, Adesua. But even Adesua grew afraid. One evening, as they approached the edge of the sacred forest, she grabbed the princess's hand. Princess, I beg you, please don't go today. Yue smiled gently. You worry too much. Adesua lowered her voice. My grandmother once told me, the spirits never chase human beings. They wait patiently until humans walk willingly into their world. For the first time, those words unsettled Yue. She stopped walking. The forest ahead looked darker than usual. The breeze carried the scent of fresh rain, even though the sky was clear. For a brief moment, she considered returning home. Then, she heard the music again. The same mysterious melody. Soft, beautiful, almost impossible to resist. Without another word, she continued walking. Obanosa stood exactly where he always waited, beside the crystal clear stream. He smiled warmly. I knew you would come. Yue folded her arms. I almost didn't. Obanosa looked toward the sky. The forest whispered your doubts to me. She frowned. The forest talks? He smiled mysteriously. If you listen long enough, everything speaks. They sat beside the stream for hours. He told stories unlike any she had ever heard. He described kingdoms that disappeared beneath rivers, villages swallowed by forests, kings whose names had been forgotten by history. Yet every story sounded true. Yue became curious. Tell me about your family. Obanusa looked away. They are different. What village do they live in? He remained silent. Do they farm? Silence again. Finally, he answered softly. My home cannot be reached by ordinary roads. The princess laughed. What does that even mean? Instead of answering, he asked a question. Princess, if you truly loved someone, would it matter where they came from? She smiled. No, it would matter who they are. For the first time, sadness appeared in Obanosa's eyes. From that day, every meeting ended with a gift, but none of them looked ordinary. One evening, he gave her a flower that never withered. Another day, he handed her a tiny bird carved from ivory. When she placed it on her window, it sang every dawn. Another evening, he gave her coral beads that glowed faintly under moonlight. The palace jewelers examined them. None had ever seen anything like them. One elderly craftsman whispered nervously, "These were not made by human hands." The princess quickly hid them away. Rumors spread. People soon noticed changes. The princess smiled more than before. She often disappeared before sunset. Sometimes palace guards searched for hours before finding her. Even worse, animals behaved strangely around her. Birds landed on her shoulders. Butterflies followed her. Wild deer approached without fear. The palace chiefs began to whisper, "This is not ordinary." The royal priest became concerned. He approached the Oba during the evening council. "My king, the spirits are moving." The Oba looked up. "What have you seen?" "I cannot explain it, but the ancestors are warning us." The palace no longer feels alone. The king dismissed the meeting, yet worry settled in his heart. That very night, the Oba had a frightening dream. He stood alone beside Omiosun. The stream had turned completely black. Suddenly, a woman's voice echoed across the water. "Protect your daughter or lose her forever." Then the water opened. Thousands of glowing eyes stared back at him from beneath the surface. The king woke up shouting. His body was covered in sweat. Immediately, he ordered the palace drummers to summon every elder before sunrise. As dawn broke, the oldest men in the kingdom gathered inside the royal courtyard. The Oba explained everything: his dream, the princess's strange behavior, the mysterious gifts. The elders listened quietly. Finally, Chief Omoreji slowly stood. His voice trembled. "My king, there is an old prophecy." One elder gasped. Another lowered his head. The Oba frowned. "What prophecy?" Chief Omoreji continued. "It is older than my grandfather. It says, when the forest king desires a human bride, he first sends gifts. The bride slowly loses interest in the human world. And before the next full moon, the marriage begins." Silence covered the palace. The Oba stood up. "No, my daughter will marry no spirit." The oldest priest spoke for the first time. "If the prophecy has begun, only the princess herself can stop it." That evening, the king called Yua into his private chamber. He looked at her with gentle eyes. "My daughter, tell me truthfully, have you met someone?" The princess smiled shyly. "Yes, father." The Oba's heart sank. "Who is he?" "A kind man, a wise man. He understands me." "What family does he come from?" "I don't know." "What village?" "I don't know." "What clan?" She looked down. "I never asked." The king became alarmed. "Oh, you love a man whose family you do not know." Yua nodded quietly. The Oba walked to the window. "My daughter, in Benin, we never marry a stranger. Not because strangers are evil, but because every family carries a history." He turned to face her. "Bring him. I want to meet him." For the first time, fear appeared on the princess's face. She whispered, "I don't know if he can come." The king stared at her. "What do you mean? He cannot come?" Yua hesitated. "Because he belongs to the sacred forest." The king froze. Outside, a sudden gust of wind swept through the palace. Every oil lamp went out at once. The room fell into complete darkness. The elder's prophecy had begun. The palace did not sleep that night. The king's words echoed through every corridor. The elders remained in prayer. The royal priests burned sacred herbs before the ancestral shrine, yet Princess Yua lay awake, unable to close her eyes. Her heart was torn between two worlds. One belonged to her father, the other belonged to the mysterious man she loved. Just before dawn, a soft melody drifted through her palace window. It was the same haunting tune she had heard beside the sacred stream. She hurried outside. No guards stood there, no servants. Only a single white flower rested on the stone floor. Fresh, covered in morning dew, and she picked it up. A whisper floated through the air. Meet me tonight. It is time. As darkness settled over Uselu village, Iwe quietly left the palace. This time, Adesua refused to follow. She knelt before the princess, tears filling her eyes. She said, Princess, if you love me as your friend, do not go. Every time you return from that forest, you seem farther away from us. Yue gently wiped her tears and said, I promise, this will be the last time. Adeswa shook her head and said, That is exactly what frightens me. The princess embraced her friend. Without another word, she disappeared into the forest. Obanosa stood waiting beside Omi Osun. His smile was warm, but his eyes carried sadness. He said, You came. Yahweh responded, My father knows about you. He nodded and said, I expected that. Soon. You must choose. The princess looked confused. Iwe said, Choose what? Instead of answering, Obanosa stretched out his hand. The water of the sacred stream began to glow. Slowly, the perfectly still surface divided into two, like a pair of doors opening. Beneath the water appeared a glowing stone pathway. The princess gasped. Yua asked, What is this place? Obanosa smiled and responded, The road home. Crossing into another world. Every step felt impossible. The deeper they walked, the brighter the hidden path became. Fish made entirely of golden light swam beneath their feet. Strange flowers bloomed without soil. Birds with silver feathers flew silently overhead. No sun, no moon, yet everything glowed softly. The air smelled sweeter than any flower Yua had ever known. She whispered, Is this heaven? Obanosa smiled. No, he said. This is simply another kingdom. He added, The hidden palace. At the end of the glowing path stood a palace, unlike anything built by human hands. Its walls shimmered like polished ivory. The roof sparkled like stars. Huge trees grew through the palace without breaking its walls. Water flowed gently along its corridors. The pillars looked as though they had been carved from living crystal. Hundreds of graceful figures dressed in white stood silently waiting. None looked completely human. Their movements were too smooth. Their eyes shone softly like moonlight. As Obanosa approached, every one of them bowed. All spirits echoed, Welcome home. The princess looked around. Iwa turned to Obanza and said, They know you. Obanosa finally spoke the truth and said, I never lied to you. I only failed to tell you everything. I am not the son of any village. I am the guardian king of this sacred forest. The people you see are the spirits who have protected these lands since before the first Oba ruled Benin. The princess stepped backward. Fear slowly replaced love. An elderly woman dressed in dazzling white robes approached. Her face was beautiful despite her age. She wore coral beads, unlike any seen in the human world. She smiled warmly and said, Welcome, Princess Yue. We have awaited your coming. Yue looked confused. After a short moment of silence, Yue asked curiously, You knew I would come? The Queen Mother nodded. Long before you were born. Your name has existed in our prophecies for centuries, said the Queen Mother. The princess turned sharply toward Obanosa and asked, You knew this? He lowered his head. Yes, from the day we met. Obanosa responded. Tears filled her eyes. So everything was planned? You were asked. Obanosa spoke softly. Only our meeting, falling in love, was my own heart. The palace suddenly came alive. Golden drums echoed across the spirit kingdom. Women began weaving glowing garments. Ancient musicians played instruments made from crystal wood. Hundreds of white butterflies filled the sky. The Queen Mother smiled and said, Prepare the bride. Before Yue could speak, gentle women surrounded her. They dressed her in magnificent white fabric embroidered with gold. Around her neck, they placed coral beads that shimmered with living light. A beautiful crown rested upon her head. She stared into a polished mirror. She barely recognized herself. At the center of the palace stood the oldest Iroko tree in existence. Its branches disappeared into the heavens. Its roots stretched beneath both worlds, human and spirit. Openosa stood beneath it, wearing flowing white robes. The Queen Mother raised a carved staff and said, "Before this sacred tree, before the ancestors, before the guardians of earth and water, do you willingly choose one another?" Openosa answered immediately, "I do." Everyone turned toward Yue. She looked into Openosa's eyes. She remembered his kindness, his patience, his honesty. Yet, she also remembered her father, her people, her village, her home. Silence filled the sacred forest. Finally, she whispered, "I..." Before she could finish, a powerful voice thundered through the forest. "Stop!" The entire palace shook violently. The sky darkened, the glowing butterflies vanished. Every spirit froze. Standing at the entrance to the palace, holding the sacred staff of the ancestors, was the Oba himself. Behind him stood the royal priests, the palace chiefs, and the oldest diviner in the Kingdom of Benin. The king had crossed into the world no human was ever meant to enter. The wedding came to an abrupt halt. The battle for Princess Yua's soul had begun. Time itself seemed to stop. Neither the spirits nor the humans moved. The sacred forest, which had echoed with songs only moments before, became as silent as a grave. The ancient Iroko tree trembled. Its leaves fell without a breeze. Princess Iwer stared in disbelief. "Father!" she screamed. The Oba stood tall, gripping the sacred staff of the ancestors. His coral crown glowed faintly beneath the strange sky of the spirit realm. Behind him stood the royal priests, the palace chiefs, and the old diviner, each clutching sacred charms, blessed by generations of ancestors. The spirit queen frowned. No human had crossed into her kingdom for over 300 years, yet here stood an entire royal delegation. The balance between both worlds had been broken. The king's demand. The Oba stepped forward. His voice carried the authority of every ruler before him. He said, "Obanosa, guardian of the sacred forest, have not come to wage war. I have come for my daughter." The spirit king remained calm. Obanosa said, "Great Oba, your courage honors your ancestors. But Princess Iwer came here of her own free will. No chain brought her, no spell controlled her. She chose this path." The princess lowered her eyes. The Oba turned toward her. His voice softened as she spoke to Iwer. "Iwer, look at me." Slowly she raised her head. Tears streamed down her face. Oba continued, "Tell me one thing. If I had forbidden you from coming here, would you have obeyed?" Silence. The princess could not answer, because deep inside, she knew she would have come anyway. The diviner speaks. The elderly diviner slowly stepped between the king and Obanosa. He scattered white chalk upon the ground, then closed his eyes. His lips whispered ancient Benin prayers. Moments later, the chalk began to glow. Everyone watched in amazement. The old man opened his eyes. They had turned completely white. His voice no longer sounded like his own. It was deeper, older, as though many ancestors were speaking through him. The diviner said, "Both kingdoms speak the truth. Neither side has broken the law." Everyone listened carefully. The spirit king did not steal the princess. The princess entered willingly. The king came only to protect his child. But, his voice echoed across the palace, a greater law exists. The spirit queen slowly bowed her head. She already knew what was coming. The ancient covenant. The diviner raised his staff toward the giant Iroko tree. Suddenly, images appeared upon its enormous trunk. The villagers watched in amazement. It was as though the tree itself remembered history. The first image showed an ancient Benin king kneeling before the spirit centuries earlier. Another showed farmers harvesting rich crops. Another revealed rivers overflowing with clean water, healthy forests, peaceful villages, prosperity. The diviner spoke. Long before any living man was born, the first Oba made a covenant with the guardians of the sacred forest. The spirits promised to protect Benin's forests, its rivers, its harvest, and its people. In return, humans would never disturb the sacred places. The glowing images changed. The people saw hunters respecting the forest, women praying before fetching water, children bowing before sacred trees. The covenant had lasted for generations. Then the final image appeared. A young woman, dressed exactly like Princess Ewer, standing beside a spirit king. The crowd gasped. To continue with this amazing story, kindly subscribe to our channel, turn on the notification bell so that you will be the first to be notified once we drop the next part.